One thing we're looking at is you having had traumatic injury, and sexual transgression is a very traumatic injury, and of course has a lifelong effect. And there's no way to say that any nicer, right? It sucks, and you can do a lot of work on it, but fundamentally, it becomes who you are. Right? That's true for all of us. Right? And this is I'm very hesitant to say these things because they can be interpreted really many ways, right? But essentially, it doesn't matter. I don't want to say it doesn't matter. It's not essential to know what is yours and what is conditioning. In the context of every human being has conditioning around their sexuality. Now, you had the unfortunate experience of your conditioning having happened against your will early on, which is, of course, super detrimental. However, after a while, right, when, regardless if you knew about it or not, who you are as a human is way bigger than that, right? Because you become a human being and you've coped with things, but you've also truthfully developed who you are. And very often when you've had transgression and trauma, you actually have developed substantial amounts of agency and sovereignty in the aftermath in order to navigate the world, right? So it's not as important to go, well, what's mine and what was given to me, as it is to say, am I happy living that expression, right? What am I not? And this is true for everyone, right? You don't have to have sexual transgression. At some point, you grow up enough to go, well, those are not really things I want to carry forward, right? Those are not things that actually feel good now. And if you can do that as an adult sovereign human and not as a wounded child, it's very difficult. I'm not, then as an adult sovereign human, you don't have to be the victim of the circumstance. Once again, very hard because you have been victimized. And that's why I want to be so careful, right? Because it is important to know you have been victimized, but it's also important to know that the sovereign self that you become as you work on yourself for many, many, many years doesn't have to fall into that conditioning. So it's not so much the sexual conditioning that I would worry about or tend to, it's the victim conditioning where you have been made or rendered powerless. That particular track is the track you want to avoid, right? And when you have been rendered powerless, then the classic ways it can go is that you stay powerless and everything becomes a confirmation of your powerlessness, which is what you're asking. Am I looking for stuff that confirms that I'm still powerless or confirms that I'm still faulty or, whatever, have not done the things I was supposed to do or whatever is typically said to you in order to keep you compliant and powerless, right, as a child. So that's one way, is that you can look for the lack of agency and the confirmation for the lack of agency. Another thing often happens is the flip side of the coin is you become very rigid around your needs of self-determination. And so now you're in this horrible place where it's either, no, fuck you, I won't do anything or, oh, poor me, right? Yeah. So then that's the pattern in which you live. And in that pattern, of course, the fact that you have been in a 20-year relationship means you're both superhumans, right? Because you could have left at any given time, either of you, right? But you haven't. And that's the third piece. The third piece is you are grown humans and you can make decisions to end something that doesn't work. Right? You don't have to stay together. But if you do stay together, because, clearly you are both, sovereign adults. So if you do stay together, and this is the thing that when people come to my office, couples come to my office, they never want to hear, and that is, after 20 years of staying together, it must work, right? It must work because you're still doing it. So we can say that both ways. We can say it very positively, which is there's enough love and commitment and willingness to suffer, which any, by the way, long-term relationship requires. Anyone who's been with somebody for a number of years essentially has to face the fact that there will be horrible betrayal, shit will suck like nobody's business, right? That's part of long-term relationship, but there's also deep love, great loyalty, and many other things. So the determination of a 20-year relationship is, are you in it because you're codependently attached to each other or one of you is a hostage? If that's not the case, then you have to say, well, clearly, even though it doesn't work, it works. Right? So that's a different issue. So regardless of your background, his background, what happened, how it happened, the issue is you're still together. And if you want to stay together, then there has to be an acknowledgement of what works. And it can't just be punishment about what doesn't work. And that's the relational bit, right? Which is different than your individual bit. Both of your individual bits is that in a relational bit you have to go, is it worth it? If it's worth it, we have to find the grace to focus on the things for which it is worth it and somehow manage to let go of what can be let go of and address what needs to be addressed. Right? And that's a deeply individual situation. But in my experience, when I work with people, I'd say 75% of the stuff that people bring in is really stuff that needs to be let go of. And then the rest of the stuff is stuff that really needs some serious work. I'm not saying this is your case. I don't know anything about what's happening, but there's this fun in the relationship. There's a fundamental moment where you have to say, okay, are we just together because we love hating each other, or are we together because there's something that's actually really good and we're gonna now carry that force into all of it, with whatever that means. For you personally, the decision is, do you want to flip back and forth between victim and aggressor, so to speak, right? Or do you want to get off that hamster wheel into something else? And then what is that something else? One of the real, amazing things about flavor work, and there's a lot of people in here, well, some people in here who've done a lot of flavor work, is that you can essentially let your body try on another flavor like a coat. It's like dress up for your insides. And you pick up the attributes of that flavor and they become part of you. It's a resonant situation. We can learn through resonance, where you can resonate with that flavor, and because it's not an actual human, it doesn't come with all the baggage. You can resonate with that flavor, pick up the things that round out who you are, and carry that into your life. And that gives you more flexibility. It can also give you extra power or extra softness or whatever, right? And so I think you'll find some of this very useful for what you're working with. There's healing cards also where you can heal some things, you know, in the archetypal realm, where all of the archetypes, of course, come from our collective experience. So you can kind of pick something up that's there and then animate that for a different expression. So, well, the problem with relational injuries is that we're typically not willing to do the thing that really needs to be done, right? So, meaning there are certain things that if you were of sane mind, you wouldn't tolerate, is one way of saying that, right? And when you listen to somebody else and they tell you a story of what happened, in your mind, you're like, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you not gone, right? So, I'm saying this to say there would be appropriate action for certain acts. However, right, it is much more complicated than that. And it's much more complicated than that because when you are with somebody in a relationship, oh God, this is such a downer. People never want to hear this. When you're with somebody in relationship, you're with them, you've chosen them so that they injure you in exactly the ways you want to be injured. Right? Meaning, we know without a shred of a doubt through our nervous system who is going to essentially injure us the way we're used to being injured. It's uncanny. You can line up essentially the almost identical human, right? Like meaning they all have the same type, attribute, whatever. And a person will be able to find the one out of the 10, people that hits your particular groove. Right? So, hence, this is what I was saying to her. Hence, when you get into a long-term relationship, this is not true for, you've just started a relationship. I would say, this is a very controversial thing to say, but in the first 6 months or a year of a relationship, if you have a strong injury, you should get the fuck out. Meaning, if something happens, a betrayal or some real upset or something that really actually is a red flag, you must leave. But people don't, but you should. Right? But in a long-term relationship, what typically happens is it all's nice, it's nice, and then suddenly they display some flavor of the same shit that you are used to. At that point, you're in too deep. It also affirms something about yourself that you very strongly believe, and while you don't like the betrayal or whatever it is, it's actually the thing you know as love. Right? Love. Because that's the imprint you received from your childhood, right? That's your love imprint. It's really fucked up, but it's your love imprint. So if I pick you somebody who doesn't do that to you, you're not going to feel attracted to them, right? They have done research, by the way, that when people are in long-term relationship, this kind of enacts itself, meaning you eventually 2-3 years in latest, you hit the home pattern, so to speak. But if people are in an arranged relationship, for the first 10 years or so, that doesn't happen, and then they have shaped each other into the people who do the things that were done to them in youth, right? So you can go either which way. You can be attracted to somebody who does this shit, or you can shape them into the person. This is why I'm saying it's a bit of a downer. But it's not a problem, because that's what human existence is about, right? You have to just bring it conscious. That's all you can do. Is you can go, oh shit, I'm doing the thing again that produces the thing that then makes me feel betrayed, but somehow I like it, right? And once you have awareness, then you can work with it. It might never completely go away, but you can work with it, right? So that's why but that's not to say that there isn't certain behaviors that warrant actually ending the relationship. I used to run a rehab, right? And then what would happen is people would actually get clean and they would change their behavior, and their family would essentially cause them to relapse because the family wants the other pattern, right? So I'm saying all of this to say there is a small part of you, typically a small stunted part of you, that likes it, right? Likes it, in quotation marks. And so your job mostly is to become aware of that part and integrate that part into the more adult parts of you. It will still produce little moments of glee when the bad thing happens, or steer in that direction, but you have it integrated, and hence you are aware. So now we talk about anger, right? Now there is something that makes you very angry, and that's where we have to make the distinction between appropriate expression of anger and inappropriate expression of anger, right? So inappropriate expression of anger is the violent lashing out in order to have relief, unless it's in the moment corrective, and of course not physically violent, right? Meaning, if something happens and you react strongly to it, that's when I'm saying appropriate, I'm now not talking about what it does to the other person, which is always a consideration, obviously, right? But if you're in an active thing and somebody does something to you that is not appropriate, right, then your anger is commensurate to the not appropriate action. And it typically has to come with a boundary. And the boundary is either I'm not okay with this, or I'm stepping away from this, or I need to let you know that I'm not okay with this. And I will let you know I'm not okay with this till the circumstances change. Now, the next step then is, if the circumstances don't change, you must walk away. Not easy, particularly if you have long-term deep investment, right? But essentially, the expression of anger and what's typically underneath, which is pain, because often anger is not the primary emotion, it's a secondary emotion. You feel strong pain, you lash out, right? This is why I take great offense to the newest, Instagram, whatever, marketing of sacred rage, right? No, right? And what I mean by that is you can't spiritually bypass a very destructive emotion. It's not sacred. It's a fucking emotion, and it's very painful for the other person, and it's painful for you, and so it's not more sacred than any other emotion, and it has to be held not as something that you can inflict on other people who have to take it because it's sacred to you, right? But as an unfortunate tool for correction or action. And so as such, it has a place, right? There's nothing wrong with anger as a reaction to being assaulted or offended or hurt. But the problem is that when you get hurt and you produce anger, that's not your primary emotion, so it doesn't really make much of a difference. The only thing that's going to result in a resolution of hurt is hurt, expressing hurt, right? But that's often very much harder than expressing anger. So if your partner does something that's extremely painful and you are raging, there's a disconnect, right? But if you might be angry, but you might also be extremely hurt. So you have to essentially go this really hurts. You have to show hurt. You have to continuously show hurt. Problem is that a lot of people can't deal with their partners being hurt. So they start rationalizing the thing, or even setting a boundary because it's been going on for too long or whatever. And they can't deal with the fact that there's actual hurt. Right? And anger, of course, is much easier to shame away than hurt. Right? So there's a lot of distinction there when you're angry and how to be angry. But, we also have to say that we're all humans, and when it's super intense in emotion, anger will come out. You want to make sure that you don't hurt anybody physically, and ideally not, emotionally to a point that they need rehab after. And, of course, you also have to see if anger is an appropriate tool in the aftermath, right? And maybe you have to apologize, or you have to leave. It's one or the other. Well, not one or the other, but those are options, right? There's other options: talking things out, making amends, fixing the situation. So there's all of that. But completely aside from the human interaction, right? Because also there's the initial pain, then there's the initial anger, and then there's punishing somebody for years after when they've corrected their action, right? Which is a whole other horrible thing you can do in a relationship. Everybody's moved on except your need to punish, or you need to withhold, or something like that. So they're very complicated things to deal with, but just to kind of recap, if it's pain, it's better to express pain. If it's anger, it has to be expressed pretty much in the moment and not 6 days later, because then it's toxic sludge and not fresh anger, so to speak. And if you can't express the anger in a moment for whatever reason, it's not appropriate, or you can't, or whatever, then it's better to process the anger by yourself. Either in therapy, in nonlinear movement, in other modalities where you get the anger out of your body. Anger is not a good emotion to keep in the body. Can cause quite a bit of damage physically as well. So old anger, repressed anger, toxic anger, anger from a long time ago, best to work out of your body without another human other than a facilitator being involved. Fresh anger, you'll have to see how you modulate.